So I think in the earlier panel, we got introduction, where is India going, vis-a-vis influencers. And we have an amazing panel here, which is a mix of, sort of a person who's actually advising influencers in many ways. We have two brands and we have a SRO, right? So it's a great combination for this conversation. As a lawyer, I have actually been on multiple sides and looked at, this influencer phenomena last, decade or so. And in the recent past, apart from the fact that, when influencer responsibility, the law is now actually putting specific responsibility on the influencers. So when I'm on the brand side, I have to convince the influencer side that, you could, take this brand on, you continue with your due diligence, but I need to give that comfort. When the brands are facing de-influencing, we have to figure out, can you really proceed against this particular, sort of campaign, if I may use that word, against your brand, and what steps can you take, if at all? And we are actually beginning to see good amount of, litigation against the influencers in Indian courts. And you will, get some anecdotes here. I would really request this panel to come up with some good anecdotes. If you don't want to sort of call out the names or otherwise, that's fine. But it will really help if you can share some, experiences, and if possible, I can share mine as well. So Lakshmi, to begin with you, right? When you are when you are sort of advising the influencers, right? One of the key issues that we have seen, and the ASCII report which I mentioned, there is almost 2/3 influencers not complying, right? You have ASCII guidelines, plus you have, in India, those of you who are not aware, we have a Central Consumer Protection Authority. They also have come up with certain guidelines. So overall, if you see, compliance appears to be low. I mean, at least from the report, right? So according to you, what additional steps can be taken, by all the stakeholders in the ecosystem? And in addition to that, in the earlier panel, we also heard about virtual influencers. Any thoughts on that as well?
Thanks, Gowree. And firstly, thanks for having me here. In the entire audience here, I'm guessing about 200 odd influencer agencies that India has right now. On the first question, right, why are we low on compliance? It's firstly worrisome, one as a marketeer and also as a consumer, that compliance is low. I want to kind of put it out here as to why this is happening. I'm guessing a lot of it is obvious, but why are influencers and brands not complying? It's kind of obvious. Why? Because influencers, they're very insecure. They don't know what's going to happen today. They don't know if they're going to stay relevant tomorrow. So when they get a brand opportunity, they don't want to necessarily say no. So they don't know if it's right to they do understand in the long term that it could cause a problem, but overall they're not really sure if they should take a firm stance and kind of say no to not complying, right? For brands, it's again obvious. So if I do not declare to my audience that I don't want to tell them that it's paid for, I have a higher chance of converting that audience, right? So that's kind of why it's happening. On how we could possibly solve this, I think the most obvious and the easy way is tech, because of the sheer volume, right? And a lot was discussed in the previous panel, and it was great to hear guys speak about some of the measures that they're taking as a country over there. So if we could get techs, like for example, Meta has a great system to kind of flag off community issues, right? If creators kind of violate rules in a community kind of a platform or conversation within the Meta platform, they get immediately flagged and the creator gets suspended for days together until they kind of resolve it, right? If there's a means to do this at a platform level, globally, if we have a unified code and platforms are compliant and agree to kind of cooperate, it would be great to kind of flag this off, suspend a creator if there's repeat offense. That's probably the easiest way to kind of get there. But of course, until we get there, I'd say there are two ways to look at it. The most obvious is, of course, the brands. Like someone mentioned in the previous panel, it's not the Unilevers and the Diageos that are the problem. Of course, they're the most compliant. We work with some of them. It's smaller possible brands that are doing it. It's to get them on board, of course. The other is probably, at least from an Indian perspective, the talent agencies, right? So the report also said that these are top influencers that are kind of, violating these rules. If we actually put together the top 15 to 20 talent agencies, they all represent the top talent in the country. We'll pretty much cover most of them, right? If they get them on board, if they take a stance that they will not put out content out there that does not comply, we'll have a lot of this problem solved. And we're really just talking about about 20, 25 agencies. That covers the bulk of the top influencers. If you get them on board, I think that's a great way to kind of solve for this, at least until we get to the tech part to kind of help and enable us to solve for it.
No, absolutely. Because I've actually worked with some of these agencies. I can see that some of them are really mindful, while some of them may not be, right? So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I think one point that you mentioned, which I've made a note about the, banning the creative, if I may use that word. We have seen that in a different context on social media, etc. Freedom of speech versus
Absolutely.
the ban, right? I mean, where do you draw the line? But it's an important point for us to consider. I made a note, maybe some other time.
However, I mean, in this case, it's a little straightforward, right? You need to put a hashtag ad.
Exactly.
It can't get ambiguous.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, in virtual influencers, just a quick line. I actually was joking to one of my clients very recently that in a country like ours, where so many of us, I don't know if you're going to have virtual influencers take off at all. So honestly, I wouldn't be concerned about that right now. And if you were, I would say the same guardrails and regulations would apply to both real as well as the virtual influencers.
Absolutely. Thanks. Bibhav, coming to you. You handle so many brands, right, as HUL, though you hived off one of them recently. So when you're handling so many brands, and especially in the Indian context, in so many languages, because virtual, influencers, the influencers are across different languages, right? How do you ensure compliance? How do you keep watch? What are those processes? And in addition to that, I think what we are also noticing, LinkedIn is coming up as an important platform from a B2B communication perspective. Are there different guardrails for that? So if you could just deal with these two points.
I think when you have to consider how to address influencer marketing, it's booming and exponentially growing. One of the quotes that I would want to start this discussion with is something from Spider-Man: with great power comes great responsibility. I think that's what sums up this entire game of influencer marketing in the advertising world. If you look at it, influencers wield a lot of power amongst the audience. It can be used for positive as well as negatives. While brands take a lot of burden of compliance, and I'll just touch upon what reputation or at least responsible organizations are doing in this regard. Before that, I think there is a sense of responsibility that influencers also need to recognize of the platform and the power they wield over their audience. It is based on a fundamental building block of trust. I think it is based, and hence the primary reason or the primary way to protect this would be through honesty and transparency. That's where disclosures come in that Lakshmi spoke about, right? But that's one point of what an influencer marketing content can have. It's disclosure of material connection, but that may be beyond. We'll touch upon other topics where influencers may have to do due diligence on the veracity of the claims. There are other obligations that are coming in. Now, while brands are shouldering the load of compliance, I think because this is separate from traditional advertising, the expanse of network of influencers, we have 600 million plus internet users or mobile phone users. You can imagine the explosion of influencer marketing India will see in the next couple of years, right? So therefore, when you have to, I think, incorporate governance in such a complex world, I think there needs to be a mix of processes and technology. I'll touch upon what there are general basic principles about creating awareness, and it needs to be a multi-stakeholder governance process because there are other elements. There are elements of misappropriation of metrics like followers, likes. So these are aspects that we'll cover in governance. There'll be governance around or guardrails to playbooks or influencer briefs on and around disclosures, the guardrails around what can you exaggerate in terms of content or what kind of content are you briefing as part of your influencer brief. All of those can be done, but two things that are very interesting, I want to touch upon what Unilever has been doing, one is for awareness, not only are they looking inwards towards building knowledge and awareness about these aspects within the organization, but also partnering with influencer agency. We just recently partnered with ASCII as well as our influencer agencies to build an additional layer of governance, because if they are aware, when they are engaging in choosing, vetting our influencers, they get the right influencers in place with the right compliance. It's a collective responsibility, and that is what has to be realized, because if you see the law also, it is clear. It does not only limit the liability on an organization or a brand. Influencers independently are liable under law, which can even prohibit them from providing services for 3 years or fines up to 50 lakhs. So while the enforcement is low right now, if influencers do not realize this sense of responsibility, self-regulate, there will be heightened scrutiny by regulators, and an SRO model may not work. I think that's the ideal way to go about, if I have to sum it. In terms of, on the second one on LinkedIn influencers, I think, it's an emerging space. It's great as a space for premium products for the audience, that's the corporate audience in that premium sector, right? But I don't think so it should be treated any differently. If you see the definition under law, or even the self-regulation that ASCII has, it does not differentiate between B2C or B2B influencing. Influencers are known as endorsers under the Consumer Protection Act, and they are obligated to do their due diligence, make those disclosures under the guidances under the applicable laws. So I don't see any differentiation. It's just lack of awareness. Organization will learn these new platforms coming up, and they'll be, I think, influencers, organization will brief their teams to ensure that these are not recurring issues on the new platform.
Sure. So those in the audience are not aware, ASCII has launched this program where they can assist influencers to conduct due diligence. I'm sure Manisha, she's here. You can circulate that. It's a very interesting concept. As you rightly said, collaboration with SROs in this regard also will be very, very beneficial to the entire ecosystem. Tarun, coming to you quickly on, especially, the Supreme Court of India recently heavily went against even the regulators, forget the brands, but even the regulators, that they were not enforcing the advertising related law, especially in the healthcare and food sector. And, you being part of that sector, especially now in the context of influencers, are there any additional do's and don'ts, especially, after how the Supreme Court has observed, the entire ecosystem? You want to sort of deal with that?
I think as a business head and as responsible for largely a food kind of setup, the way I look at it is, even with the influencer setup, the responsibility of disclosures is much more today, and evidence-based marketing is essential. So whether we're working with a set of influencers formally through various agencies, and or they're doing it on their own or user-generated content itself. I think it's very, very important that organizations strengthen their backend in terms of building evidence. We've seen, in fact, not just some influencers, some celebrity ask us, they went on to even check our clinical data on a food product, saying that, look, my husband is a doctor and he will, join me in going through this. And they spent almost half an hour, 1 hour going through our clinical data to understand what we're saying, does it get substantiated or not? And I think that's why it'll be very, very important that the brands own the evidence-based things that they do. And therefore, when we extend it to a larger ecosystem, whether it's control marketing, traditional marketing, or influencers, we are able to use this in a meaningful way. The other piece on do's and don'ts is that we also, at least my belief is that we follow a positive path of influencing, where we are not using it to disparage or use it negatively against situations, because that's where the most conflicts start happening. And that is a responsibility of the brands as much, of ensuring that wherever their influence goes in terms of using their ecosystem, they're driving it in the positive direction. Those are 2 or 3 things that I can quickly talk about. Of course, there are more.
Sure. Coming to you, Stephane, I think because, from an SRO perspective, when you are looking at influencer space, and as was discussed in the earlier panel, when with the digital expansion and, that your monitoring systems, what you have already implemented, are there any takeaways which, we can also learn? It would be great to understand your experience.
So thank you. You will have the French accent now. So please, and like you said, please work with your national SRO. There are many in this theater. So before the monitoring, in fact, what SROs are doing is to gather all the industry. So, of course, advertisers, of course, the platform, the agencies, and of course, some influencers, at least the influencers who really think and understand that it's also the rules are going to protect their audiences and the trust they build, because before having a collaboration, a commercial collaboration, they have to build a community. So, and when they have a big community, they don't want to fail, at least. So, but before that, that's why we need rules. And the first rule was regarding transparency. So everywhere we all have the same issue. So to teach them how the transparency is the first step, and then of course the content of what they will say or show in their post, reel or videos or whatever. So, but first was the identification of the labeling. So came after, of course, the support of the platform. But at least we start. There wasn't. From the platform, the easy tick to have the identification. So we start with having a code, but writing a code is meaning to have the support of at least few people and few advertisers, or at least a group within our members, because in France we have it's a membership-based SRO, but it works in every country. So first we start with that, and then when we are with the second step is education. So that's why even if we start with a small monitoring, we already see that there's a big gap of knowledge, at least. They don't want to do bad, maybe some, but not everyone. So to fill the gap, education was the answer. So that's why we create, of course, e-learning courses and a certificate. So we came with the idea that maybe some influencers, they want to show that they do something special. Yeah. So they have a credit. So they can pass an exam, and they can use the responsible influence certificate, we call it, but we also need to control. So we control before and after. But the kickoff of the certificate came also because big brands say publicly that they will not work anymore with influencers who doesn't have a certificate. Okay. So I mean L'Oreal, I mean Club Med, I mean Accor Group, for example. It was a real kickoff. So came also the agencies, Publicis, and so. So just to say that I still I will work with you if at least I know you train yourself to general rules, basic rules, or maybe because we have also some option for flea influencers or for gambling. So because we also work with the national authorities regarding this topic, so it helps to kick off at least. And so the rule, education, and of course, role of SROs is to control. So by monitoring. So like I say, by using AI. Of course, we just to gather a big amount of different kind of posts. So we have also two tiers of influencers. We control some, at least the biggest influencers not certified yet, and we still control the certified people. So we have more than 2,000 now certified influencers, and keep learning. So, and we improve, of course, our own courses. But the courses is not only for the influencers; it's also for the agencies, for the advertisers, for the marketers. So it's different, of course, but at least the basic rules still on.
You mentioned about the platform, so I just have a follow-up question on that. How do you, the collaboration with the platforms, how important has it become? And what are the various models that you have adopted?
But the collaboration starts from the beginning, because all the platforms are members. So they were part of the group the starting group. So, and also because they understand and they know that there are regulations starting or maybe coming. So that's why they implement the tick system just to help the influencers to identify easily. There's a commercial collaboration, and sometimes to add the brand, for example. So it means for TikTok, and mean for Meta, and of course Google and Snapchat. So the collaboration came really from the beginning, and also from they help us to the awareness of the certifications. So they help us. We do some advertisement. We use influencers to influence other influencers. So it was the same way of talking, but they push, for example, at the scale of France. So we had, for example, more than 30 million impressions. We are less than 70 million people in France, so 68 exactly. So some platform, Meta, for example, Instagram, help us to push, or TikTok, they help us to have this impression of our own advertisement of what is the certificate and the do and don'ts. So that's why we use few influencers to promote, because we know that they always watch peer-to-peer in this world, in the influence world.
I hope, everybody realizes here whatever Stephane said, we have to do how many multiples to apply that in India, right?
But so it's easy. You said 600 million internet user and mobile users. So.
Okay, coming to you, Tarun, I think very, very interesting topic of de-influencers, right? And in fact, as we speak, I'm writing an opinion for one of the brands, how to deal with that issue, which I have to finish tonight. So I'm really at it right now. So I'm very, so I'm really keen to understand from you. I think you have had a very successful case in Delhi High Court. But, basic overall thoughts, the reason this becomes important and critical, right, for any brand to go against somebody who public relates to, right? And then to take it on and, what are the decision-making points when you're looking at this, and how do you sort of arrive at, the possible challenges that you can, sort of go against them?
Don't bank upon what I say for your note, though. And because some of those cases are in public domain, I'll not get into specifics of those because some of them in appeal and they're sub judice, so I will kind of avoid. But I think one of the things that de-influencing has brought in, and in last couple of years it seems to be gaining thrust, is one of it is that it gets picked up much faster than the regular influencing. So their power seems to be a little disproportionate to the regular influencers. The sensationalism, the negative news picks up these days much faster. Absolutely. So therefore, if someone has chosen that path, the responsibility goes substantially more. If you carry a certain amount of reputation as a de-influencer or as an influencer and you're going to do influencing, I think the expectation is that, yes, there is freedom of expression, Constitution gives us the right, but we also don't have the right to cross the lines on disparaging, hurting someone else's reputation, or we have sufficient scientific evidence to back it up. And those are, I think, very, very fundamental things that any organization will go out of the way. And I believe that's how I would look at it in my personal capacity for my organization, that we will go out of the way to back it up because our brand reputation, our organized reputation is at stake, and somebody cannot use it loosely to go after us at a general level, not on any specifics. Now, just to build a case and without getting there, let me take an example which is completely in a different zone. It's a brand which comes under a lot of internet negativity. Sometimes, I would say 90% of the times, not based on evidence, but I'll just give an example. So we are a significant player in sugar substitutes, and somebody took in a smaller forum was talking about how when the body gets, and this is a science-based guy, and I'll reveal how this happened. So he explained that when the body gets, instead of sugar, you give them sugar substitute, and the mind reads it as sweetness and it releases insulin. Now, at a logical, unscientific level, this sounds true. But the body is so scientific and so far, so much that this is incorrect, fundamentally flawed. The guy wrote himself as PhD, but he was not in nutrition, medical, or any of those things. Not getting into what this gentleman was so-called doctor with PhD, but was wrong because body has recognized, the brain recognizes 100 micromolar glucose levels to release insulin and not sweetness. It's just that how loosely you word these things in a forum, and there are people, because you have a position, you are a PhD, you're using a doctor, and you just use this. Now, obviously, we could convince, explain that, and close that loop. But the point is that when we have a forum, when we have a certain set of audience, we have that responsibility to double check, understand the scientific evidence rather than just use loose things. And therefore, I think from our experience, my personal view is that so de-influencing should not lead to disparagement, should not lead to reputation things. If it comes as brands, as organizations, as anyone, there will be one should be ready for repercussion. It is better to do this homework, understand this, and go back. There is enough regulatory framework. I think as a food industry, we've also picked it up because we saw a certain set of multiple companies going through it over the last couple of years. And hopefully with better ASCII regulations are already in place. So I think things will only get better and people will not use it as a shortcut to get popularity and sensationalize back of the packs and create.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, what influencers or rather de-influencers say that, we are saying so in public good, right? I think I want to challenge that a little bit, especially when it's not with scientifically backed data. And one of the examples which I've discussed even with the regulators, imagine a particular skin cream I have been using for a year, right? Somebody suddenly comes and says in public forum, that I feel, I have looked at some data, which absolutely there is no data, and says that, this is using carcinogenic products. Imagine as a consumer, the anxiety I will face, right? And in fact, it is, sort of creating kind of mental trauma for me. Right. So are you doing public good in the garb of, kind of public messaging or otherwise? So unfortunately, we don't see that much regulation still on these points, in terms of or controls, except the court cases. And that's why, Vibhav, I want to come to you. Yeah, sure.
Just one more point. Sometimes we're also, when they sensationalize, they're also crossing the line. And
yes.
On the regulator is looking at these things. Don't think the regulator is.
Absolutely
sometimes they cross
right.
the line of saying as if FSSI didn't notice it or didn't know this. No, there is a full details available on the back. You're just sensationalizing. So you're also
questioning the regulator.
Demeaning the regulator.
Absolutely.
And that's really what, as food industry, we picked it up, that don't demean the regulator. And that's why, sorry, I just missed the point because
right,
sometimes, and if you have a point which the regulators missed, I can tell you in India, the government has really opened up the regulations. You go up to them, you tell, I have a very strong scientific reason. Chances are they will listen to you.
Absolutely.
They will open a dialogue. They're listening to NGOs, they're listening to everyone. But
absolutely,
just don't demean even the regulators.
Absolutely right. And I think one of the cases, in fact, has picked up this point that you mentioned. So, Bibhav, apart from litigation, are there any other strategies? Because sometimes when there is a lot of negativity out there, to put a positive message and to actually put it across to the consumer is not that easy. So, any thoughts on that?
So, as Tarun mentioned, just to put it on a lighter note, I think the influencer economy is booming so much. They have enough, I think, performance marketing spends also to boost their content, I'm assuming, making it harder for organizations like us. But just building on what Tarun said, if you see the plethora of case laws, and not many, but over the last 4 or 5 years, there have been quite a few led by organizations, big organizations, trying to protecting their brand. The principle is very clear and going back to the fundamental power of influencing, the irreparable damage it can create for a brand. For an individual like me, the way defamation protects me, I think this entire area of de-influencing is going to be not legislated, but adjudicated under the common law of disparagement or denigration under tort, right? And hence the same principles that we've learned on comparative advertising, I think Tarun did touch upon, more holistic viewpoint, no loose fact being used, etc., are being reiterated. So the legal aspect is there. Now, when you look at why it is happening right now, and it's a trend that I'm assuming, and in all optimism, the industry will mature up. I think the influencer industry, it's grown exponentially at such a pace and a little unorganized. It's not like traditional media where there were 10, 20 media houses publishing ads or broadcasting ads for us. It's modular, personalized, or dynamic content that is being passed on through various influences. So therefore, those are difficulties that comes in. I think at this nascent stage, I think brands have tried reaching out amicably to help them explain, because there is a reason for dialogue. There's no reason to litigate. I think none of the organizations that I know or general counsels I've interacted with, or even business heads, would like to litigate. There are better utilization of resources and money than litigation, to be very honest. So I think right now the stage is the phase is very nascent. So I haven't seen, and I've seen very mature influences in other parts of the globe really engaging in the brand to really come out with something beneficial for the consumer, the audience, or the regulator. So that I think that will come about with the maturity of the influencer economy or influencer marketing economy in India. But I think there is, as Tarun mentioned, there is a very fundamental need for influencers to understand the power they have and the impact they can create. And therefore, it is not an opinion. Courts have stated it. It's not an opinion. That opinion needs to be backed by fact. You can't be under the garb of opinion, say, it's my opinion. I can say anything. I don't like your brand. And some of these influencers have real influence over numbers which are larger than population of countries, a lot of countries, right? So therefore you can see the impact, and hence there needs to be certain guardrails. I think they will, with the kind of actions the brands are taking to protect it, slowly influencers will realize the guardrails within which they need to operate. And to be very honest, even the high courts in India have recognized the importance of commercial free speech or even freedom of expression. They've said that you can state things factually, but they also need to realize, because they're at a pedestal, they cannot use sensationalization, they cannot use loose terms against and discredit a reputation which is built over years and can get affected in just a minute of reel of the influence. So I think that's how this should evolve. Right now, litigation is what we are seeing. Amicable ones are not really being reported, so I don't know. But I don't see much amicable resolution happening right now.
Right. Thanks for that.
Quick question on the same thing, right? So one is de-influencing, where influencers are actually bad-mouthing a brand, scientific or unscientific. But I see a whole lot of influencers now just talk about, you mentioned opinions, but these are fairly harmless opinions. For example, I just pick up, I'm a content creator, and I say, I don't like these 5 brands. 5 brands or 5 products I regret buying in 2024. I see content like this. I'm guessing, I know why the influencers are doing it. They're doing it because they want to sound authentic. They want to sound organic. Because the moment I say, I don't like this, but I like this, as an audience, I tend to believe you better, right? Because and it's probably not a paid ad at all. It's probably organic content that they're creating. But as brands, I'm guessing, have you done any, have you actually analyzed to see if this is actually causing damage? Because I see a rising trend of this kind of content. Actually, largely, I've noticed it in the skincare and personal care kind of products.
That's true.
So we face all the time. We are absolutely okay. In fact, the entire several platforms, commercial platforms, aggregators, Amazon, etc., they have 1-star rating, 5-star rating. It's part of life.
Absolutely.
Dealing with criticism is normal and it's absolutely okay. I have seen enough influencers who, we reach out to them. Okay, what got missed? Can we do this?
Correct.
So I think he picked up a very good example of the fact that a lot of this gets not reported because we are also talking to a whole lot of them, and some of them are not necessarily very happy for us. So we are okay with that as long as you don't use the power to say don't use this.
Absolutely.
I can talk about that. So with almost with a fury.
Criticism, which is okay, but
Criticism is fine. It's part of our life, and
absolutely.
the whole user-generated content, the whole expression of
Even
speech
the
is
review
around that.
system, right? The online, consumer review system. It's exactly that, right?
It is built around that.
actually even on the consumer rating system, right? Sorry. There's a lot of paid reviews now making the rounds.
I
In
think
fact,
the government is already looking at it.
Yeah, as a
But
consumer,
sorry.
I'm really sorry.
I'm just as Indranil said, I'm looking at the watch. So two quick questions we need to solve before we close the panel. One is, what is the influencer angst when they are dealing with the brands? Are they getting good information? Are they getting support? If at all they get targeted for something, is the brand supporting them? Just quick pointers on that.
Sure. Influencer angst is actually real, right? Because they're hustling on an everyday basis. They're kind of figuring out what content to make. They stay relevant today. They might not stay relevant tomorrow. They're literally kind of fighting for survival on a day-to-day basis. So when there are brands that go up to them and tell them, hey, we want to engage with you, but we do not want you to put out a declaration, the influencer knows that it's probably not the right thing to do, but they don't want to lose out on that opportunity a lot of times. So that does exist. But I believe the easiest, or rather the most efficient way to kind of solve for this is education. And that's not just to the influencers. I believe brands and influencers both need to be educated. And the most important point to kind of cover there is that there's one commodity that is actually more sought after by all brands today. That's like the unwavering consumer love, consumer attention, right? In other words, brand loyalty. 10 years ago, it was not as difficult to get that brand loyalty, but today it's extremely evasive. And the one set of people who actually gotten this right are the influencers.
Yes.
They have this audience support, they have this consumer love they have with them. So if both the brands and the influencers kind of understand that it's this trust that you're playing with, right? And if you're not going to be honest, you're going to lose your consumers' trust. If the brand is not going to be honest, and if it's going to come out in public, if the influencer is not going to be honest with their declaration, and if it's going to become public tomorrow, in a minute, you're going to lose your audience, consumer love, your audience's loyalty. We've seen cases where there's been a influencer who's a beauty influencer speak about mental health, right? She was immediately called out and kind of lost her relevance, and it took her forever to kind of regain her reputation back. There have been, we all know about a lot of recent cases, which is the content was a mismatch from what their audience perceived them to be, right? Correct. And that's it. That person kind of lost their entire reputation. It's the same thing for brands and influencers. The moment you lose your consumers' trust, you've lost the game. Like brands are built online now. Winning your consumers' trust is absolutely key for both of you, right? So if you have this education communicated and the importance of this consumer trust is, kind of drilled down enough,
actually,
I'm guessing there'll be a lot more. I believe self-regulation is a great way to go about this. And if that does happen and people do understand how important it is, how my audience loyalty is important to me, I believe there will be a lot of changes that can happen.
That journey, it will take some time, but I think we are sort of everybody.
The larger influencers already know this. The larger brands already know this. It's the mid and the smaller ones that need to slowly start understanding they're getting there.
Because the other thing in the Indian context, just to add, what I've noticed is also the local, influencers, because one state is equivalent to a nation in some cases, right?
Absolutely.
So that local, and plus language, the way they are explaining, there are so many nuances in the Indian ecosystem, that at least when I'm looking at it, I'm coming across. Like, I need a translation to figure out what that person is saying, right?
In that context, actually, the regional audiences, right, are extremely critical of the influencers than probably a pan-Indian or an English-speaking audiences in the Indian context. Just like all of South, right? Tamil, Telugu, all of them. If you actually go to the comments, a lot of them get called out for just doing paid ads.
Right.
They're always called out. You've also started getting into the bandwagon of branded content.
Right.
So their audience is their biggest critic.
Right.
So if they're not going to be, not just declaration, like, you mentioned that if you're not even going to be if there will be audiences commenting on, how good the product is. If you're not going to be able to answer that, you lose the credibility. So in all of these regional markets, like you mentioned, their audiences are very, very, they're literally after the influencer to kind of make sure that they've got their facts and information right.
Absolutely. It's time up, but I just have one last question for Stephane. What do you see as a, way forward? I mean, what are the additional points as an SRO you are beginning to notice in this influencer marketing? Anything which we have not covered?
As SROs, we keep... we need to update code, maybe. We talk about virtual influencers, but it's not only that. But at least the code has to be contemporary, at least. And so trainings, need more trainings. There's also that's why influencers was now they prefer to use the content creator name for at least the more mature influencer, because it's really what they do. It's not only a product placement, in fact, it's anymore. So when they're really creators, and of course, if they create, they take more risk, maybe, of doing something they don't know, they cannot do, especially with specific product. We talked about alcohol before. And also because some content creators, they're also social seller. And so they sell things. So it's different from B2B because this is their own company, in fact. So that's why we have another option of a social seller certificate also. It's different. And because, of course, when TikTok shop, because they are coming in France, it's totally different. So they will use another way. So that's why it's perfect for SROs, because it's always moving.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm sure you understand you need us. So.
Thank you.